right.
Anyway.
And welcome back to the 11th hour. Today, actually, is a great day. Chief, can you introduce yourself and let us know a little bit about you?
Yeah, sure. My name's Chief Warrant Officer Daugette, actually promotable Daugette.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. I've been in the Army almost 20 years. August will be 20 years. And from Huntsville, Texas. Been around quite a bit in the Army. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But I currently serve as the Command Food Advisor for the 11th Airborne Division and help advise the CG and CSM on all things food service for the 11th. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Well,
So, yeah.
Welcome to the 11th hour. And,
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me.
Of course.
Yeah, this is great.
Looking forward to talking to you about food service, supply chains. Like, we're going to get into...
Yeah, there's a lot going on in Army food service, specifically Alaska, and trying to modernize, keeping up with Arctic conditions and things of that nature. So looking forward to talking with you guys about some of the initiatives that we have going on around the installation and some of the things that our 92 Golfs do on a daily basis that really help out our warfighters here. Yeah.
So I know you have a kind of a long list of things that you've been able to do in the culinary world. Can you rattle some of those off?
Yeah, so I started my career off in the 75th Ranger Regiment and met my mentor there, and he was really big into culinary arts, and I'll give him a little plug here, Sergeant Major Morgan, and he competed in the Olympics, and so he kind of brought me in as his apprentice for the most part, and so I started my journey into the culinary world in 2004, basically washing dishes for the Army's culinary Olympic team. That kind of sparked my interest, right? And so I made it a goal in 2004, like, hey, I'm going to go from being the dishwasher to a competitor on this team one day. And so in 2012, I was able to do that. And in that process was a lot of different competitions and, mentoring and in training and a lot of long, hard hours behind the scenes to gain those skills and get better. But, deployed a lot. In between deployments, I'm training for these competitions. So went to Iraq, Afghanistan, and then eventually I got selected to go cook for the Secretary of Defense at the SecDef mess, and did that for a couple years. In 2011, won Armed Forces Chef of the Year, which was a real big accomplishment for me. It was kind of one of those like block check things that you kind of got to do in order to be able to make it up to that Olympic team. And then I was hand selected to be one of the enlisted aides for General Dempsey. He was at the time the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and that was a great experience. I mean, so much mentorship from him and from the rest of the enlisted aides on the team. So, and that's when I got to go compete at the Olympics in 2012. Came back from that and competed in they created a new Masters competition, which was a group of chefs in the Army, or actually the Joint Force, that have won Chef of the Year or had a silver medal in that competition. So you're competing against kind of like the winners. And so I actually won the first one of those. And then continued to grow. And so I went and did training with industry, which is a really great program for our enlisted soldiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can go out and work in the with a civilian chef for a year. And I think right now they're actually going to the Culinary Institute of America.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so you're working with at the culinary school, and then on your free time you can do classes, and then you come back and you give those skills back to the Army. So you're teaching, you're instructing there at Fort Lee to the Joint Culinary Training Division, which is a great opportunity to you're training the future there, right? So I did that for a couple years, and then put in my warrant officer packet and wanted to kind of start impacting the food program at large. And I went up and spent some time with the 10th Mountain Division, 2nd Brigade, and then my last assignment was with U.S. Army Japan in the 10th Support Group, and then now I'm here as the Division Food Advisor. So that's a handful of things, right?
Nice.
We can
Just
dissect that a little bit.
Just a few things in there.
Yeah, but it's always been passionate for me. I've always loved food. I mean, when I was little growing up, eating a good meal meant something to me, right? And, I always look forward to my birthday and getting to go out to eat. Like, that was the one time a year that, me in the house, I got to pick where we got to go out to eat. I'm sure other people had those types of experiences, right? Like, you have that restaurant you go to, and then once you start making some of those things that you were eating that were really good, you're like, wow, this is, not only is it fun, like, I get to eat good food all the time. And then you just kind of, that passion kind of grows from there. So, I've always just loved it, and and doing it for soldiers, whether it's in Ramadi to Crit, the Pentagon. And actually in 2018, I got to go cook at the White House for the Army's birthday. That was unique and fun. It was special. I mean, you talk about so a lot of great opportunities have been given to me through the Army Food Program, and I love it. it's not every profession you get to bounce around like this.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
get these types of opportunities. Like you can go be an enlisted aide, you can go be on the front line with the troops, you can go fly in airplanes and cook meals on planes, you can go cook at the Pentagon. You can do that in Army food service. You know,
Everybody needs to eat, so
Yeah.
you're allowed to go anywhere that everybody goes.
Yep.
So.
Yep. And you know, right now, even in the 11th, we got some great opportunities going on for our guys. We're sending a handful of soldiers up to Fairbanks, and they're going to do 2 weeks of ice carving training with master ice carvers.
Ice
That's
carving
super cool.
training.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're in the
Okay.
Arctic, right? You know, and
There is ice.
yeah, there's
That's
ice.
awesome.
Like that's
Just
I mean,
a little bit. Just
yeah.
a
So
li-
this is something that we're hoping that we can do. You know, every year. It's part of being out in the community and doing things with those folks and growing a passion that's for the MOS, right? Like that's one thing that you have to have for this job and this career field is a passion for service and people, and for what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Kind of a long intro.
So many questions. in
Yeah,
there.
well, we can
So-
dissect any
Yeah.
portion
Yeah.
of that, and go into it.
So we'll start kind of at the beginning. So the love of food. Why did you choose to pursue that in the Army rather than like a traditional like restaurant route?
yeah, so when I went to the recruiter, which is funny because I was originally about to go join the Marines, right? And I told them I had this allergic reaction to shrimp, and so they like cut me off at MEPS, like, sorry, dude, you can't join. And they just basically they drove me back to the recruiting station. You know how they got the different, you have Marine, they're all on the same,
they're right next to
and they just basically kicks me out of his car. Remember, this is like 2002, 2003
Yeah.
time frame. Like we didn't have cell phones that you just pick up, and I'm just kind of standing there as like a 17-year-old kid, like, okay, what am I going to do now? And the Army recruiter just sees me standing there. He's like, hey, man, what are you doing? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. He's like, come on in.
You look lost.
Yeah, and so then he starts laying out bonuses. My uncle was in the Army, and he actually was, he convinced me to go to jump school. So at first I was just going to join the Army, do my 4 years, do college, get out. It's kind of like what we all kind of
Yeah.
start off in high school, right? And then someone kind of bends your arm, like, hey, you should go to Airborne school, right? And it's like, oh. And I talked to the recruiter about that. He's like, oh, yeah, you can get a $3,000 bonus. I'm like, what's a bonus, He's like, well, you were interested in money? Like, show you these MOSs, right? And at the time, cooks had good bonuses. And so, like, I narrowed my scope down quite a bit. And I was cooking at a restaurant in our local hometown. And so I was like, I know I'm good at this, right? Like, I do this on a day-to-day basis. I can go in. I can be effective. I like eating. I like being around food. So, yeah. Yeah.
I have questions because I've got
okay.
so many.
So actually, I do. You're a chef, and you mentioned it earlier. Is that sometimes chef, they find their focus, and what is your focus as far as food? I mean, do you have a favorite food? Do you have something you enjoy?
Yeah, so believe it or not, like I'm more of an eater than I am a chef, especially nowadays. Because
What does that mean?
I mean, I like to eat food. Like I like cooking.
I don't know if you're aware of this, but eating is when you take food in.
In your mouth?
Chef
Oh, really?
prepares food
Yeah.
Okay,
to
got
be
it.
taken.
Yeah,
in.
so
But sometimes there's nuances and details to things.
yeah. So for
Right.
a while, when I was competing, I started going really deep into like the pastry field. That's where my mentor kind of specialized at, and that's where I kind of started following his lead and learning those skills. But really, like I mean, you gave me a perfectly cooked medium rare steak. Like I'm right there, like I'm in heaven right there. You know what I mean? Or just
Yeah.
even like a sushi roll that's like freshly made. I mean, I was in Japan for 3 years, so like the sushi was
Yes.
yeah, it was legit. We ate
It's on
well
point.
in Japan, so. Simple food done right, kind of going back on what I was saying earlier, like that's kind of where I live at now. Like, a good gravy, braised meat, mashed potatoes, good, right?
Yeah.
Just really depends the season too. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then another question is like, so cooking here in Alaska, is there anything that you think you would get a chance to cook that you don't think you'd get anywhere else?
Oh man. Well, it's more challenging through the Army food program to get some of those like unique things up here, like like moose or bear or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of my buddies hunt, and they're like, "Hey, try this moose jerky and bear this." And my predecessor at the shop, he's real big into fishing, and I think he owns his own charter. But he just goes out and fish, crab, everything, and hunts and moose and bear and all that. And he's always throwing me snacks and stuff to try, but. I would say that's one of the cool things about being in Alaska. I would show you, if I had my phone on me, I'd show you guys a picture. My neighbor sent me a picture from his house of a moose, like literally right in my front yard while I was
Nice.
at work yesterday. I'm like, that's crazy, right? Like, and this thing's as big as a truck, man. It looks like somebody parked a brown truck in my front yard, but it was just a moose. Yeah. That's one thing I love about Alaska. Like, if you could be driving, I mean, my first day driving on installation, there were 3 bears just crawling up on a tree, just on the base. Like, that's cool, you know? You don't see that anywhere else. I didn't see it in Okinawa, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It doesn't get old.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
The Olympic team, is that, how does that work? Is it like the Army, all like the sports teams?
Yeah, so it's
like
similar, right?
Specifically like your job.
Yeah, so it's the Culinary Olympics. So there was the World Cup that happened every 2 years, and the Olympics was every 4 years. So it's through an international committee. So we used to compete against all the different countries. So, you know, the Brits would have a team, Switzerland would have a team, the Germans had a team. Those were some of the heavy hitter teams that we compete against, and Sweden would also compete. But you would basically do 2 events. You had a hot food cooking competition, which was 6 hours, and you're cooking 150 3-course meals, right? And it's judged. I mean, you talk about hard, like we talked about the judging at the Fort Lee competition. The judging at the Olympics is like next level. So what they do is, for example, they'll randomly take plate number like 35. And then they'll take number like 119 and then compare them. And if everything's not perfect, like, you're losing points on everything. Yeah, so 2010, when I was at the World Cup in Luxembourg, I had a pastry chef. He was a master chef, Gunther Hyland. He followed me around with a clock and a notepad on every practice. And every time I would make a move that didn't equate to, you know, working towards the final production, he'd start his clock, stopped it.
Count all your wasted seconds.
Yeah, and you'd be surprised if you did that in a day. You know, like, you follow him for a day and walk around, you would realize, like, holy crap, I got like 6 extra hours a day that, you know, I could probably, you know, use doing something else. But I learned that from him too, because he would tell me, it's like, you wasted 3 hours and 21 minutes. And then the next time you wasted an hour and 25 minutes. And so you see yourself getting more and more productive and more efficient. Yeah. Like, that was intense. I'm not gonna lie.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and that was for about 3 or 4 weeks of, you know, this is one of the best pastry chefs in the world, right? I mean, regarded. He's a master pastry chef, and he's following you around and micromanaging you.
Is it hard? Like, you go there and you compete at like the highest level, being able to do things and try things and, you know, innovate and elevate, and then you have to come back to a dining facility. Is there a challenge there, or do you try to kind of bring the two together?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it is very challenging, because making a perfect plate is a matter of like timing and getting ingredients and putting it all together. But influencing, you know, modernization and changing a food program at large, that is challenging, right? Like, we can go in and change recipes in the dining facility. Like, that's easy to do. We do that. Like, we have great food in our facilities here, some of the best. But when we start getting to like resourcing big changes, right? Now you're talking about strategic enabling organizations that have to come to the table, and now we're competing for dollars, right? We all know that's really hard to do, and you know, getting those dollars to be able to be invested in food service, that is challenging. And that's where I spend a lot of my time at right now, in that space.
Trying to think.
Because well, now I think like is a good time to segue into, you know, the challenges, because like I've been all over the place looking for fruit. Cucumbers are a pain to get right now.
Cucumbers are,
And I don't.
And I mean, everybody's having a hard time getting eggs because avian flu epidemic.
Yeah.
But I mean, just pretty much any time, especially during the winter in Alaska, it's difficult to get fresh food.
Yeah. And it's even harder. There's actually a difference between J-Bear and Fort Wayne, right? That next leg of the logistics mile is even a challenge, right? So when you open up, you know, that delivery truck on the back dock at Fort Wainwright, and it goes and sits outside, and it's negative 40. Like, you have a short window to get that lettuce inside before the quality just exponentially starts to go down. So that's another layer of challenge. So you have supply chain challenges, delivery challenges, environmental challenges that all play into it. So, you know, the enterprise at large works really hard.
Here in Anchorage, like, very simple thing, sailing schedule can be off by 1 to 2 days, and you'll see, you know, half full shelves for a month.
Yeah. No, it's a challenge. I'm gonna tell you right now. There's a lot of good people doing a lot of good stuff to make sure our facilities stay stocked. And a lot of the changes that we see and we know, the customer typically doesn't even know that it's even happening. which is what we want. Like that's really the gold standard. So when you go in, you're gonna have a salad bar with like 25 different options. You're gonna have a meatloaf or something to the tune of that. You're gonna have fresh vegetables that are seasoned and cooked. It's not just gonna be steamed. You know what I mean? Like we're doing all those types of things, trying to bring vegetables in fresh or frozen fresh versus the old cans. Like when I grew up, it was number 10 cans, drain the juice, throw it in steamer, salt, pepper, done, right? But we're not doing that anymore. Now broccoli is, you got soldiers cutting up the broccoli and seasoning it and stuff like that, and making a homemade cheese sauce, but things that we're doing different is keeping the cheese sauce separate, right? Because not everybody wants those calories. Some people just want fresh broccrockly, right? And those are the types of changes
broccoli
that we
with
can,
salt on it, and that's about it.
yeah, it's money, right? It's good stuff.
Yeah.
But no, that's a challenge. The supply chain's a challenge. Arctic field feeding is another really big challenge.
Oh, yeah.
That we have here. We've gone through. I mean, we've been cooking in the cold for a long time, but we haven't been doing it in a decisive action environment like JPMRC, right? Like, because we haven't done it like that. When I talk to people that have been in Alaska before, it was like, oh yeah, but we just go out there during these months. I'm like, no. Well, we're not going out during these months. We're going out there in all months, right? And we're jumping a CK. We're moving it from one site to another. We're trying to provide hot rations forward out in the flat with the soldiers, right? And not just, hey, here's your Arctic MRE. See you later. Like, that's not the gold standard, right? Keeping that morale up and keeping soldiers with hot food.
It's fascinating to me, the things that you don't think about
Yeah.
when you get here, because you're like, Alaska, okay, moose, bears, it's going to be cold. But
Right.
not thinking through very specific things about how cold affects how you just go about your regular life.
Or what it affects additionally to whatever you're doing in life.
Right. Oh, yeah.
The tyranny of distance and getting those types of supplies.
Right.
Like, that's the next layer of that supply chain, right?
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about garrison operations. Now, let's take it that next level, which is field feeding. So now we're taking, a UGRA ration, right?
Right.
And we're taking that's probably going to be located in a training area.
Yep.
We're going to take it down to the Joe that's on the front line.
Yeah.
And he's finally going to eat it, right? Like, that's a long way for that cordon bleu to travel in order for, for it to be consumed.
That is a good point.
But if you can get there, that means you're winning. If we go from a winter MRE to like some hot soup
That cordon bleu.
and a cordon bleu, if I can get you a cordon
from an
bleu,
MRE to hot.
if we can get you a cordon bleu at negative 40 and you're in a foxhole, you're winning.
Oh, yeah.
That's the goal,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
We're all about the innovation. So anybody listening to this that's got a good idea for Arctic field feeding, anything, please send it,
Yeah.
and we're gonna add it to the list and continue to communicate that with all of our strategic enablers that are trying to help us out on this venture. So
Do you enjoy that part of it, like the having to solve those extra
Solving
problems?
yeah, I do. It is. I mean, it is challenging, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm not. I mean, I think companies like REI or whatever, right? They have like whole R&D sections, right?
Oh, yeah.
That and scientists and everything. They're like, okay, you're gonna figure out how to change this water bottle to purify water and whatever, right? For us right now, it's the food service community across the 11th talking, and then us communicating with our folks over at NADIC at the Soldier Support Center there. They're the scientists and the engineers that are kind of helping us create these types of things. If there's any time to try Arctic innovation, it's right.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's right now. Yeah. And we can't wait on it, right? Like,
No.
because, to resource a platform, let's say, for example, we want a new, containerized kitchen that's designed for the Arctic. Well, one, you have to design it. Two, it's got to be tested.
Yep.
Then it's got to be funded. And then you have to equip it. And it's got to be built. Like, that's a lengthy process. Like, it doesn't happen overnight. So there's a sense of urgency on our side in the food service community to identify these problems, articulate them, and start trying to generate some, get that snowball up and going so we can start seeing some progress. Because right now, to me, status quo is just not going to cut it for Arctic field feeding. Yeah, that's pretty much it for 11th Airborne Division Food Service. I mean, I keep answering questions for you guys if you got them. I don't want to cut it short, but yeah, it's up to you guys.
Well, when you're talking, I was thinking back to like all the meals I've had while deployed, and like they always do everything they can to make sure like you get your Thanksgiving meal, you get your Christmas meal, and like it's that like you said, it's the thing that brings everybody together because
Yep.
we know no matter where we are, what we're doing, like those 2 holidays specifically, like you're gonna be fed and you're gonna be fed well.
Yeah, we put a lot of work into the Thanksgiving meal. Before I got here a couple years ago, when we just switched over to the new contract, there was some significant Thanksgiving, problems just getting turkeys in. It's because of supply chain issues, right?
Oh yeah.
We
We had Thanksgiving meal in the Himalayas.
Okay.
In
Yeah.
India. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah.
Came to very much appreciate, the amount of work it takes just to get turkeys into, super remote areas.
Yeah, it's a
It
challenge.
was-
And I was in
yeah.
Japan, and it was in the middle of COVID, so I went through a lot
man.
of supply chain problems getting turkeys.
Yeah.
It was a worldwide problem.
Yep.
Getting those in, especially because they have import restrictions in certain areas. So that makes it another challenge. But I'm gonna tell you, these soldiers across the division, they put so much work into this. Yeah, just the logistics out here in the Pacific is very, very challenging.
Oh,
we
yeah.
have real good policies and procedures in place to help support those types of effort. When we do contract cater meals and we're going through a local source like India, or we're going through it could be anywhere, Papua New Guinea.
Right.
I've had, when I was in Japan, we had people out in Papua New Guinea. We did contracted meals through there. We had people in Palau, Yap, and all
Yep.
these places. And it's you have to food and water risk assessments, right?
Yeah.
Like you think about it, it's something
yeah.
that we all take for granted. But how often do we have Americans in these countries, right? And is everybody friendly in those countries? And then how is the water being assessed? Because we just take for granted you can just go fill up in the sink and then get your water. But what if it's not?
Not
clean?
always the
It could
case.
deadline an entire
Yeah.
organization just
Oh,
by
yeah.
contaminated water.
Yeah.
It could be really bad. So food and water risk assessments, and then we have the caterers, or like you said, they're inspected and they're evaluated. I mean, we had folks out. Are you talking about the last India trip?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. We wanted to make sure that there was folks
Oh,
out
yeah.
there. Yeah.
And for which we are
Eternally grateful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a big
Oh, yeah.
conversation amongst planners
Was.
and everything else. And fortunately, we got inspectors out there.
Yeah.
If not, we were looking at MRE options and things of that nature, which we don't. We want to use host nation support
Right.
when we can, because it's also builds that relationship up. That's one thing that we were big in Japan with was doing bilateral service agreements and working
Yeah.
with our partner. Country over there, but it's like that with India too. It's a relationship builder when you
Yep.
eat, and it's something that we've been talking about today is how food brings people together. So if I make a meal for you and you don't want to eat it, then you might take it a certain kind of way, right?
Yeah.
And so that it's really big to make sure that you guys, when you're out there in India, could eat those meals and eat them
yeah.
safely, though, right?
Yeah.
Like that's safety, sanitation, quality of food, accountability are 4 priorities, and the way I see food service, right? So always put safety first, whether it's a dull knife that a cook shouldn't be using, or
Yeah.
or an inspection on your food in a foreign country. We go through that. And
Oh yeah.
it's not really negotiable. You know what I mean? Safety's not. So don't want to take any, especially like during COVID, right? Like there's huge things.
Right.
You got like the salad bar, right? Everybody touches the tongs that
Right.
grabs the romaine. Well, wash your hands.
great.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I can't physically stand there and make people do it, but like that's an important thing about what we do inside that facility that we can't shake a stick at. We got to keep those standards up. So yeah.
Thanks, Chief Daugette, for coming on. This has been awesome.
been
Honestly,
great.
I love talking about food.
Yeah.
Almost as much as I love food. So
Awesome.
I think it's like almost lunchtime. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Great. Yeah,
perfect.
you know what?
And
Oh, it
now
is.
we're hungry
Go to
for
the
it.
DFAC. Yeah, right on time.